Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here on the grade of the former Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and later Canadian National Railway's Graham Subdivision. We are just to the northwest of the community of Murillo, Ontario, which is located in the municipality of Oliver-Papoonge. We are on the west side of Mud Lake Road, which is right in front of us here, and you can see the grade going back to the east over there. That section of grade is private property, so unfortunately we cannot follow the grade there. And then the grade continues this way over here. And you can basically see it's passing through a little cutting here. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be following the grade, not from here. We're going to pick it up just a little bit further to the west here, and we're going to be following it for a little bit here through a piece of private property that we've been allowed to come and visit. So we do have to say thank you to the property owner, Howard, for inviting us on here. This is actually a redo. So we were here 4 years ago, and at the time, Howard had invited us to come and look at the railway grade here. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to be picking up the grade just right over there. So it basically skirts in through here, and then it comes out onto the driveway into his property here. And so basically where we are here on the railway grade is we're kind of in between two stations. So to the east of us is Baird, and to the west of us is Crest. So as we've pointed out on numerous occasions, the Grand Trunk Pacific used a alphabetical naming pattern for their stations, right? So they basically used, for the most part, the letters of the alphabet. This line was no exception to that. I guess we can undo Luna now. And so basically Baird was the B station, Crest being the C station, and then there was Alba further to the east, Dona further to the west. The sun is poking out here. The sun's been kind of in and out all day kind of long, or at least lately. In the last little bit here, kind of pops in and then hides again. So you'll notice the sign that Howard has put up here, basically indicative of the old Grand Trunk Pacific line, so a railway crossing, and then you can basically see Fort William going that way, and then some of the other stops on the Grand Trunk Pacific going to the west, Winnipeg, and then all the way to Prince Rupert at the end. So basically the right-of-way comes through here, so basically comes in through here and picks up the driveway here and continues to the west here. So just give me 1 second here. I'm gonna stow Luna's leash here, so now that I don't need it anymore. So I'm gonna make sure she didn't get run over on the street. So today is the 16th of November. We've never kind of been out hiking this late in the year. We're just taking advantage of some really nice weather this fall. So while we have an opportunity here, we're going to do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway between 1905 and 1908. It was going to be an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company, which was one of the actually oldest railway companies in Canada, to construct a second transcontinental railway across the country after the Canadian Pacific. So you can here, you see, before I get into the story, you can see this very elevated grade here, which is over what is normally, this is kind of a very wet area here, but because it's been so dry, you can see how without water it is, so how dry it is. So basically this idea of constructing a second transcontinental railway across Canada had been kind of going around for a while. Not long, the idea surfaced not long after the Canadian Pacific Railway had been completed, and it kind of went back and forth. And the big problem was Grand Trunk really wasn't keen on building this second transcontinental railway, not necessarily by themselves, because it was going to be very expensive. Obviously, looking at the experience that the Canadian Pacific Railway Company had and how difficult and how expensive it was, so they weren't particularly keen on sort of constructing this this railway line by themselves. And essentially they were looking for some assistance from the Canadian government, and so there was a lot of back and forth between them and between the Canadian government and the Grand Trunk Company, and back and forth, and so finally they came up with an agreement to construct this railway line. And so again, construction began in 1905. There was actually construction had started here in Fort William, which is now part of the city of Thunder Bay, and there was actually some construction that was started in the Winnipeg area. And so this section of line was actually not part of the main line. It was actually a branch, and basically it was going to be built from Fort William all the way up to what eventually would become Superior Junction. And the name Superior Junction is very indicative of the purpose of this line, which was basically to link the line, which again was going to be built as a partnership between Grand Trunk. So Grand Trunk was going to build everything from Winnipeg to the west to Prince Rupert on the Pacific Ocean under the name Grand Trunk Pacific. The Canadian government was going to build everything from Winnipeg to the east under the name National Transcontinental all the way to New Brunswick. And then Grand Trunk was going to operate the NTR system. Now, again, this line was going to be a branch, and it was going to basically give the Grand Trunk Pacific NTR system access to Lake Superior, hence the junction point being called Superior Junction. And today's Superior Junction is located just to the east of the modern community of Sioux Lookout. And so the line, again, was constructed between 1905 and 1908. And the connection was made. Now, unfortunately, not long after the hole, and there's the sun poking out, so hopefully it's going to tuck back in again, because I don't like it if it's too sunny here. Not long after the entire line was built, there was a problem that popped up, because again, the Grand Trunk was supposed to operate the NTR. Now, unfortunately, when the time came to do that, Grand Trunk backed out of the agreement, because basically they were having all kinds of financial issues because of the construction of their part of the line. They did not want to operate the NTR section. So now the Canadian government's got a problem, because who's going to operate the other half of the Transcontinental Railway, the NTR section? So what ended up happening was the Canadian government actually created their own railway company to do that. It became known as the Canadian Government Railways, and that came into effect in 1950. Now, this line was a Grand Trunk Pacific line, but it was a bit of an anomaly because it connected to the eastern part of the Transcontinental Railway, connected to the NTR. So what happened was when the Canadian Government Railways was created, this line was leased by the Canadian Government Railways from Grand Trunk Pacific, and so therefore its name changed. So it had originally been the Lake Superior branch, or the Lake Superior division of the Grand Trunk Pacific, and its name changed to the Fort William and Wraith subdivisions of Canadian Government Railways. And so then it operated as part of the Canadian Government Railway network up until late 1918. And what happened then was the Canadian government decided to merge the Canadian Government Railways with another bankrupt system that they were operating at the time, which was the Canadian Northern System. And the amalgamation of those two lines created Canadian National Railways. And so that came into effect in January of 1919. So then at that time, the name of this line changed once again. It became the Fort William and Wraith subdivisions of Canadian National Railways. And then later that year in October, the name of the line changed again. It became the Lake Superior subdivision of Canadian National Railways. Now, around that time, Canadian National began looking at their railway network in the area, and they realized basically they had a duplication of lines. Basically, they had two railway lines running in the same general area to the west of what is now Thunder Bay. You basically had the old Canadian Northern line, which now became the Kashabawi subdivision, and you had this line, which in 1922 changed its name again to the Graham subdivision. So what they decided to do is they decided to consolidate the lines. So what they were going to do was they were going to take the Kashabawi subdivision and they were going to double it. They were going to add a double track west out of Thunder Bay to a place that would become known as Conmee Junction. There, they would construct a bridge across the Mattawan River, linking the Kashibawi subdivision with this line at a place that would eventually be called Dog River Junction. And so then the plan is that basically they would utilize that double track of the Kashibawi subdivision all the way to Conwy Junction, and then it would split. Trains going west would continue on the Kashibawi subdivision to Atakokan, and trains going onto this line would then split off across the river and continue to the northwest. And so the plan eventually became is that everything to the east of Dog River Junction on this line would be abandoned. And so in 1924, this line, in preparation for that, was split into two lines. The Crest Subdivision, which this was part of, and then the Graham Subdivision. And so apparently the last train ran on this section in November of 1924, so about 100 years ago this time. And then in 1925, the line was actually split into three lines, so the Crest, the Wraith, and the Corn subdivision. And in the spring of 1925, this section of line was abandoned and eventually ripped up. And so the line continued as the Wraith and the Corn subdivisions until 1931, when it was remerged into the Graham subdivision, and it continued operating until 1994, when the line was abandoned and the rails were all ripped up. Okay, so we're going to pause here, and then we're going to continue working our way to the west along the grade.